All right, this is an Audi A8 Delta 4. That's Alpha 8 Delta 4. It's a 2017. It's got the 3.0T, which is a 3-liter engine that's got a supercharger on it. I'm going to talk about how I change the coolant. Let me start it right at the beginning. Audis are insane. All German cars are insane. When it comes to maintenance, design, engineering, they're all insane. Now, given what I've just said, I still love driving them. If you've driven a lot of cars and you get into a German car, you understand why people are willing to put up with the nonsense. It's sort of like a relationship. If 90% of a relationship is great and 10% kind of sucks, it depends on the 10%. Obviously, somebody trying to kill you at night, that probably is a big deal. But having a German car is like a relationship. And part of that relationship is maintenance. Now, do I have to do this my own maintenance? Heck no, but I do anyway because it's interesting. So today we're going to do the coolant. Now, Audis, like any Volkswagen Audi group, wants a particular type of coolant. And it's supposed to be a G12 or higher. And there you can see G12, hopefully you can. I think this coolant is G13. It definitely meets the requirements for the Audi. And I'm going to show you the tools assembled to do the job. First thing I did was, since it has a supercharger, it originally comes with these little plastic plugs here and here. Now these plugs are famous for getting heat soaked, ruined, and cracked. So what I did is I replaced them with these aftermarket plugs by 043 Motorsports, and they're bleeder screw kit for a 3.0T. And I've inserted them right there. Why did I make the difference? Because with my technique, you open and close these a lot, and these plastic plugs just aren't going to go the distance. Then you have a 7mm socket, because you got to twist these open and close them. It's part of the bleeding process we'll get into later. So we've got the coolant, we've got the right kind of plugs, and then I have this kit made by Astro Pneumatic Tool Company out of North Carolina. I bought it because I've got a lot of stinking cars, and changing coolant is a big deal. Now, what's special about this is it does a number of things. It can pressure test both the system and the radiator cap. In addition to that, it's got all these adapters which fit older cars, newer cars. It even has an adapter that fits the Audi A8. So understand that the idea is to go the distance. But we're going to do what's called a pneumatic fill. What you do is you get a compressor, which is hiding over there. You have a Venturi effect coming through here. The compressed air comes through here. And when it's on, it creates a vacuum in this line. This line will go to that wonderful cap here and suck it dry, about 30 millimeters or centimeters of mercury. So it sucks pretty hard. The idea being that you evacuate all the air that's still in the system. Now, the Audi is a difficult car to fill and drain. You wouldn't know that. You'd think you'd do it like any car. You'd just put it up, you'd fill it. You'd use my crazy little tool here that I've used in the past so that the coolant would be higher than the rest of the car. But oh, no. German engineers don't think that way. That's one of the reasons we have these bleeder screws, these special bleeder screws on the engine. Because the supercharger, which is hidden right in here, this is the supercharger, has coolant going through it. And it can collect air bubbles in these chambers, which are not bled by the normal technique that we're all used to. You have to crack the passenger side, or in the United States, the right side, first, bleed out all the bubbles and get fresh coolant, and then you have to bleed the driver's side, or the left side in the United States. Do the same thing. And just so I don't forget, after you take it for a test drive and get it warm, I crack these again. The system's pressurized. I just gently crack them open and you can see the residual air bubbles come out and then you get fresh coolant. You want to make sure that these are as air-free as humanly possible because obviously air doesn't cool and it's a supercharged motor. It generates a lot of heat. So I've taken the cap off. I've already put in the adapter for the car. We're going to raise the car up and then I'm going to show you something that's a little different, but trying to drain the coolant out of this car, a 2017 Audi A8, I don't know how the Germans do it. I simply don't know. There is no petcock that I can find on this car. If there's a petcock, I can't find it. And I've looked, and hopefully somebody in the audience will go, oh, here's where the petcock is, and I'll feel like a fool. But what I'm going to do is, since there are two, you see these two lines here? These are the ones that bring coolant up to the supercharger. I think this is intake, this is exit, because the coolant has to be cooled in order for the supercharger to stay cool, so the intake air temperature stays cool, so you get more performance. And those two lines run all the way down here. We're looking down, and I'm going to disconnect these two hoses and start draining. Then I'm going to come up, I'm going to pressurize the system and force the coolant out of the reservoir through these hoses and then pop it out. It'll come out these hoses. Now, is that a complete coolant change? No, it isn't. I freely admit that. So this is a technique you have to do multiple times. Drain it, fill it, crack the valves, drive it, drain it, fill it, crack the valves, drain it, fill it, crack the valves, drain it. You see what I'm getting. So I'm going to run about 4 gallons of coolant through it. And the coolant that I just showed you comes concentrated, so it's a gallon. So when I mix it, I end up with 2 gallons of coolant because I take a gallon of deionized water, mix it with a gallon of coolant, gives me 2 gallons. And I know it's not the best technique, but it's the only technique I have. The other question is, why bother about coolant? Well, coolant, think of coolant as being the oil of the cooling system. It doesn't just cool the engine, it lubricates the engine. It helps protect all the gaskets and seals from being eaten away because combustion, after a while, the coolant loses its ability to protect the car. And it's better to change the coolant too soon than to change the coolant too late. Because if this coolant gets bad and is unable to buffer the acidity in the cooling system, it's an aluminum engine. You'll end up with a car that starts to be eaten away. The gaskets start to wear prematurely. It's penny wise and pound foolish. Don't cheap out on the radiator and the cooling system because you think you're going to save 20 or 30 bucks. It is false economy. It's always been my philosophy. Change it before it needs it. Don't change it after the coolant's gone bad. Although you'll feel real good and say, oh, look, I changed the coolant, it had gone bad. The car's going to live so much longer. Realize that the car's been losing functional life, usable life, because the coolant's gone bad. So I'd rather change the coolant a year early than change it a year late. So that's the reason we're doing what we're doing. And obviously I've got the gloves and the protective eyewear. Getting this stuff in your eyes really sucks. So, time to go down below. See you in a minute. All right, we're underneath the car, duh. And the beauty of having a lift in your garage is what you're going to see. It's real easy to do this nonsense. Now, it can be done on jack stands. I used to work completely on jack stands. But obviously, the front of the car, driver's side, passenger side. I pointed out the tubes that come down from the supercharger that carry coolant, and these are them. Now, the reason I've chosen these hoses is trying to get to any other hose to drain the coolant. I have no idea how it's done. I particularly don't know how to operate these lines. So, and there is no petcock that I can find, and I've looked and looked and looked. I can't find one. So I've taken the approach of, these are called, I think they're called spring clamps or scissor clamps. And you really would benefit from having these tools, which I've gotten, which allow you to grasp the scissor clamps spring clamps nicely. There's a hole on this end, a groove, and then there's this piece of edging here. A little hard to show you, but there's a groove there. And what it allows you to do is, you see how the spring clamp has a single piece and a really long piece? You just take it like this. You put the cup end on one end, put the other end on the other, and you squeeze. And it's supposed to lock, but that's neither here nor there. And then you slide it over here so it goes off the metal tube underneath the there. And then this little handle, it spreads it apart. You put it down. You have your bucket ready. I'm doing it one-handed. This is going to be a little weird. And look at this, typical German. You see how there's a little post here? I'll try to show you. And there's a notch in the hose. That's because you can only put it on this way. Yeah, you can't use your judgment. Oh, good. There we go. Oh, yeah, baby. I'll bring it up. Coolant. That's from the supercharger. This is from the reservoir. So we're draining all the coolant. I'm going to put it down. I have my typical cardboard because I'm a slob. Like I've told you before, a friend calls me oil spot. So we're just going to let it drain. Now, I will be going up. I'm going to lower this down, and I'm going to force air pressure through that reservoir, which is located on this side, located up there. And then I'm going to pressurize the system so that wherever coolant comes out, it will come out here, go into the bucket. Obviously, dogs don't do well, animals don't do well with coolant, it kills them. So we've done that, and I'm also going to disconnect the second line. Maybe it's overkill, I don't know, but I'm down here, I'm doing it. I'm going to get everything out that I can, and like I said, I will let these stay disconnected. I'll lower the lift down. I will then pressurize the cap on the reservoir, and then I will watch the coolant come out. Then I'll reattach these lines, and we'll come into the next step. Now, if somebody knows an easier way to do it, oh, by all means, tell me, because I don't know an easier way to do it. This is sort of the typical frustration. I've asked around, and it appears that all these cars are just a little bit different. And my car is a little bit different, but it's a great car. So you'll see me in a bit. Now, what I'm doing here is I have it connected to the system. The system has got a vacuum in it, and I'm going to create that vacuum now. I'm going to turn on the Venturi effect. I'm going to open this up, and you'll see that meter. See how it's rising? 20, 30. It's creating a vacuum inside the cooling system. Now, we'll come and turn this a little bit like this, and I'm going to suck coolant from this hose up into this hose, because I don't want the air. And then I'm going to do this. We're going to open this all the way, and you'll see the gauge starts to drop as it's sucking the coolant from the bucket. It's taking it from the bucket to the area that's vacuum. This is at a minus 29 centimeters of mercury. And you can see that this gauge is slowly dropping as it sucks the coolant into the system. The advantage of this is that because it's evacuated it, it's got a negative air pressure, which means the air has been sucked out of the system, and we're now filling it. And when it drops down to zero, this is sort of an Audi technique. Sorry about the noise in the background. We're going to, down to zero, I will suck it like this. My assistant knows that it may get a little messy now. That's a little bit of the coolant that comes out. We're going to suck it. We're putting another vacuum load on the line. What? I may not have turned the compressor on. Yeah, sorry about that. But you get the idea. This is how we do it. Now we're going to suck up the coolant. So we remove the air, then turn this off. I'm going to go check to make sure that we got, God, is that on? I don't think the thing is on, but you got the point. I'll be back. Oh, the next thing I'm going to do is, once this is done filling it, I will take this, mount it here, fill it up with coolant, and then come over to the Supercharger bleeder screws, which are here and here, and then empty them. And we'll see that later on. All right. You can see the container, which has the pink coolant stuck into the reservoir here. It's got a nice tight seal. It's pressurizing it, and here is the coolant coming out of the bleeder screw here. And it's coming out clear. There's no bubbles in it, which means we've removed all the air from the Supercharger cooling system. Now, this is the passenger side. We have to do the driver's side. You always start with the passenger side. I don't know why, but that's what all the pros say. And we'll crack it open, disconnect the wrench, and then we'll see if we get any bubbles. Happens quite often. And try to sharpen the focus. And we'll see if we get any bubbles to come out. And yes, we're gonna have bubbles. See how there's nothing coming out? Soon coolant should there's the coolant. It's coming out clear with no bubbles. That means that there was air in the Supercharger cooling system. And now we've removed the air. So what's important after you've done this, and yes, it's a pain in the butt, but hey, it's a car, is go for a drive. Obviously keep your eye on the temperature gauge. And if the temperature gauge doesn't do anything, run it till the car is hot, 5 or 10 minutes. Come back, and this is where I'm breaking the rules. Pressure cap is on here. The system is pressurized, but I will actually crack these open. Left side first, or passenger side first, and I'll get some residual bit of air, and you'll see the air bubbling out with the coolant. Then it'll run clear. Tighten it down, 4 Newton meters. Over here, do the same thing. A little bit of air mixed with coolant. Tighten it down, and you are done. Now, my system requires that I do this multiple times because the solution to pollution is dilution. I've said that before. Whenever you get coolant change, nobody does 100%. It can't be done. When you get your oil change, you can't do 100%. Diff fluid, transmission fluid. So it is part of the system that you put in a gallon of new coolant, run it for a while, mix it up, drain out a gallon, put a new gallon in, mix it up for a while and drain it. And pretty soon you've put in enough new coolant that the base capacity, the capacity of the coolant to absorb acid, because the coolant becomes acid and loses its ability to protect the car, gets diluted, and you've refreshed it. You'll see a lot with the Ford F-350s. You don't always have to change the coolant on those trucks, but they actually have a bottle stuff that just puts the missing components of the coolant back into the coolant. The items that allow you to prevent corrosion, destruction of the engine gaskets, the block, everything else. So my idea of rejuvenating the active components of the coolant or antifreeze has a basis in fact. So that's it. Nothing else to show you. Talk to you later. Bye.